And hello and welcome. My name is Martin, and today what we're going to be doing is talking about landscaping. So everything that we've done so far has been using shapes or geometries or some type of a mesh. What we're going to do today is we're going to lay out what looks like a landscape around the area that we're actually going to be playing in. So to give you an idea, if I push play right now. In the first area, not so much. We don't notice that there isn't any landscape behind us because most of what we can see above the wall that we have is sky. But if I was to get to a certain vantage point, like right here, if I was to go up into the second floor there, I might notice that that looks kind of weird. It looks like we're floating in space, or that there's a really bad cloud bank and there's nothing out there, right? So what we want to do is we want to kind of change that a little bit. Let me go to a different place and I'll show you the same view. Let's go up here to where I've got this temple. Yeah, sorry for it being super dark, but we will change the lighting on this so that we can see. Okay, again, if I was ever able to get up high enough to be able to look over that wall like we did out there in the building, we would see this empty nothingness. So let's figure out how to get that fixed up. So I'm going to hit escape, get out of the gameplay. And the first thing that I'm going to do, obviously I'm going to need a little light to be able to work and see what I'm doing. So I am going to go ahead and go to lights and grab a directional light and put that in there. And the default lighting that it comes in with should be good enough, although it looks tremendously odd with the night sky up there. So I'm going to click on the night sky and let's go and change, let's bring the sun back up. So with the night sky selected, or with the sky ball selected, let's go to sun height and let's make it that color. At least for now, and then later we can go back once we don't need the light anymore. And if you want to, if you don't have the skylight, you can drop a skylight in there and that'll help make the reflection of everything look a little bit better. Remember, that's for the shadows, for for brightening up the areas around things like shadow. Okay, anyways, landscaping. So everything we've used so far has been up here in places. We see paint, but we're going to go over to landscaping for right now. So let's click on landscape, and we're going to get this really weird green 80s grid thing here in a second. Okay, so what you're looking at is a landscape that we're going to then be able to sculpt. You see here that we've got manage, sculpt, and paint, and those are going to be the three things that we're going to talk about in Project 3 to make this look more realistic. Now, word to the wise, the school's computers, depending on how big your computer is, let's say, depending on how big your computer is, you can make this landscape pretty big. So if I say fill world, this would be the largest landscape. I think maybe if I do double sections, that would give me even further. Let's get this let me get my camera speed all the way up to maximum speed, and you can get a pretty good idea of how big that is. I mean, that's a couple of football fields. Okay, I'm kidding. That's way larger than a couple of football fields. I mean, if you can imagine how big this area was for the player just to get through. So let's go and push play, and we look at this area, and that looks tremendously big. But let me go up to that second floor just so that you could maybe see if that area is still out there, and it's not. Okay. Anyway, so that's really big. So if you've got a really big computer and you're willing to go crazy, I don't even know if my computer can take this. Yeah, I probably wouldn't want to go that high. Okay, so something realistic. I'm going to go 63 by 63. I'm going to leave it one section by one section. It's going to be good enough for us to be able to put mountains and stuff in the background and make it look like we're somewhere and not just floating in the middle of space. All right, so 63 quadrants, one by one section. I think I was doing 8 by 8. Okay, so that's good enough for right now. Now later on, actually, because we're in the manage, there are ways to add and subtract from this, but let's go ahead and build it first. So let's go ahead. So if you hit fill world, it's going to fill the world. If you hit create, it's actually going to turn this into a mesh that we will then be able to start manipulating. Now the first thing that we notice obviously is that this is much further down than the bottom of the area. So again, I want to make this look realistic. So I'm going to click on this and I'm going to scroll to see where my up and down arrow keys are. Oh, okay. And to move it, obviously what I'm going to need to do is click on this, and I need to get actually out of landscaping. I'm going to need to go back to place, and with that I should be able to select it, and there are going to be my up and down. Okay, so that'll let me adjust. Alright, so that's obviously too much, so with that selected, I can come over here to the transform, and I can slowly start to bring this down. Okay, remember that the inside wall and the outside wall are a little slight difference in thickness, so the outside wall will feel taller. Let's go down to about 2. That's going to take forever. But we want to make sure. Okay, so I'm going to zoom up where I can see the bricks. I'm going to make sure that I have, again, the landscape selected, and I'm going to use the up and down arrow tool, or the Z motion location, I'm sorry, and I'm going to maybe go 1 brick up, or 2 bricks up. That's fine. Okay. So now I don't have the land appearing like it's floating underneath the area that I'm actually going to be working in. It's actually going to be making contact with the wall, which is going to be inside the gameplay area. Alright, so from there, the next thing that we want to do is, let's go back to landscape, and we're going to look at manage. And for whatever reason, my computer takes long when it does that. Okay, so we're going to go to manage. And let's zoom faster. Okay, so from here what I can do is I can grab a selection of things. So if I needed to, let's say, remove a whole row or do something like that, I could sit there and select a whole bunch of these and then do what I need to in the transform tool, or give it its own material or something like that. So from there, the next thing would be the add. So again, we're in manage, and if we needed to, we could create a really interesting sort of winding, and then this would all be part of the area that we would actually be playing in. So maybe you have your character go through some type of a narrow alleyway, or maybe you know, I don't know why you would do that, but you can, okay, so that you can add each one of these plates if you want. Just like you can add, you can also subtract. So, oh, well, because I had the other one selected. Alright, so now I can get rid of those. And the same thing's true with the bigger box, right? So I could go like that and swipe aside. So if I feel like the game area is too big, I can tailor make that game area. Okay, so that's the manage. The move to level and the other 3 down here, don't worry so much. The select, the add, and the delete will be the ones that we use the most in this class. Okay, so from there we have Sculpt. Alright, now inside the Sculpt you have a Sculpt tool, And the Sculpt has the first tool, the smooth, the flatten, the ramp, the erosion, hydro, and you can read the rest of them down there. So basically, let's just take a look and see how this works. I do have, if I go into brush, or I go into the Sculpt settings, and then I pick, let's say, circle. The circle is going to have a strength. The strength is how far up or how fast this thing is going to pull up when we do make changes to it. And why is it doing that? Okay. So let's make the brush size was actually kind of small. Let's make that sort of big so we can really see what's happening here. Okay, so I've just made my first little mountain, right? So to show you that again, what I've done is I've gone into the sculpting tool. I have selected circle. I've done a smooth linear drop off, so it's going to have see the inside pattern is quite smooth. So when I make these mountains, they're actually going to have like smooth rolling hills to them, right? We could change that to linear. And if we were to do that, you can see that the top is flat now as opposed to the other one which had like a rounded top. Let's look at the spherical. Okay, so that gives me more of a rounded edge. Let's do tip. And that has more of a plateau mesa feel to it, right? So basically what's happening is using the sculpt tool, I select the brush, and right now it's a circle. That's why everything here is coming off as a circle. It's just how is it pulling up, right? Is the edges more drastic? Are they more steep? Does it have a flat top? Does it not have a flat top? Is it very rounded on the top? Which is what we're getting here with the brush tools. So from there, the other thing we can also do is we can use alpha brushes, which means we can come in here and assign and select our own texture. So if we go and find, let's say, I type in rock texture, and let's grab that graphite since it's already loaded. And if I come here now, you'll see that I'm getting something that has, you see how this has like black edges and white edges? It's using that to figure out how much to pull up as it pulls up. So negative spaces are not going to pull up as much, whereas white spaces are going to pull up way more. So you get these very jagged rocks when you do something like that. So again, if I was to go slowly across, I could create like a bumpy surface where there's not as much. Now the only problem with bumpy surfaces is that your character can get caught in bumpy surfaces. There might be like a pit hole here somewhere that the character or the first person or the player might get caught in, so you may want to eventually end up smoothing some of this stuff out. But for initial texture, it's kind of cool to just kind of, you know, the longer you click and hold, the more drastic the effect is. I'm going to hit Control-Z to get rid of that. And now the other thing also that you can do as we're sculpting, right, is everything we've done so far is making it come up. We can also make it go down. So if I hold the Shift key, I get the opposite effect, right? I get the effect of like making a canyon, or, you know, if this could also be underwater, like a lake, right? So if we're thinking about like creating a river system, one of the cool things you can do is, oops, I'm doing it the other way. Okay. So maybe it branches off this way, and then it branches off that way. Okay, so eventually we'll fill that in with quote-unquote water, and it'll look like we have land here and a water running surface underneath. Now, there we go. Okay, so that was the alpha brush. Patterns are the same thing. So the pattern brush, component brush, that just brings up a whole area. So maybe you needed to, yeah, that's crazy. That brings up a whole area. That's kind of cool because that makes it kind of look like a waterfall right there. So maybe you have a like a higher area in the video game and you want to bring up whole sections. That's kind of weird. I'm not a fan of that thing in the middle. These kind of like lines that are running through right there. So I'm going to do some undos. Alright. Now, speaking of undos, the other thing you can also do within the Sculpt tool, remember that you have all the other tools too. So if we were to use, let's say, Sculpt tool smooth, and we could then start smoothing this area out so it starts kind of pulling back on it, so we can look at some of these rough edges, and we can see that it starts smoothing some of that out. Again, it all depends on how much smoothing you do. You know, so play around with it. Let's bring this tool strength way lower, and we can see that it's not quite as drastic now, that we're not getting like quite the, like over here is filling in very fast, and over here it's kind of giving us a little less drastic pull on that. So we can create things that look realistic as well as not causing areas where the character could get caught, right? Where they might be like, ooh, that's pretty bad right there. Where they would be too many edges or something like that. That's way too deep. So I might go back from the smoothing tool to the sculpting tool, go from the component brush back to this one, and just sort of bring that area up again. There we go. Okay. Now, the other thing is, this area is also useful. You could theoretically have your character find a way to get outside of this compound. Like maybe there's a gate or an underground secret passage that would lead them out, and then get into the larger game area of the sculpting that we're using right now. Because we could theoretically put ourselves, for example, let me grab my first person character. Let's again leave the sculpting mode. Okay, come over there and let's push play. So I can play in this area too. I could walk up to some of these structures. I could fall into that water. I can literally go into this space. So all of this place is playable. You want to obviously make sure that the characters don't get stuck in certain areas and that they're actually able to navigate through without too much problem. So if you do create an area like this, you are going to see how that area right there was too deep for me to come out of. So I might have to fix that a little bit. So let's go back to landscaping. Okay, so we've seen the smooth tool. Let's go now to the flatten tool. And if we see what the flatten tool does, it kind of creates a recess based on the strength of the tool that you have. Let's see. So it creates nice flat areas based on the last thing that you click. So if I click up here and I hit flatten, notice that it'll flatten based on the top edge. But if I click down here and then flatten, it starts actually taking away area, right? It starts recessing the area because it's based off of whatever the last thing is that I touched. So again, I'm going to touch up here and I'm going to smooth out that area. Then I'm going to touch down here, and then I'm going to continue to create that flat base that we're seeing, or that flatter area that's happening down there. So again, I'm going to click, let's say, down here and then flatten, and that you'll see that I get a slightly lower level. Okay, let's say we click up here and we flatten, and you see that we're getting that top edge. Even the mountain goes away. So let's grab again that one. So we're flattening back out. I don't like those hard edges. Let's go from that deeper edge so that we create a little bit more of a area where that water is going to go through. Okay, so that's the flatten brush, or the flatten tool. Now the ramp tool is kind of interesting. There may be situations where you might need to create a ramp. So basically what you do is you click and drag. On the second one you're going to drag up the area that you need the ramp, and then you're going to say add ramp. And that's going to create the ramp that you will need. So if you've got like a big mountain or something that you want to create, like a lower land bridge to something that goes up into a higher area, you could create a ramp that way. The ramp also does have settings. With the ramp still selected, I suppose I could, let's see if I can make this a wider ramp. Let's make the fall off. So the fall off is the area that's walkable. The smaller it is, the wider the ramp. So let's see if we can hit enter. So every time you hit enter or add ramp, it's going to add that ramp. So now we have a wider ramp. Let's see if we make it thinner. And make that thinner and say add ramp. Yeah. So we would have to go back and flatten that out. So if we wanted to get rid of that, we could go to the flatten. And if I had a wider brush, this would go faster. Okay. So we've now seen the ramp. Let's go to, so the erosion tool is meant to kind of create the effect of water over time. So you see that it creates kind of like these, just sort of like random soft spots. It's kind of like this soft, rough, bumpy terrain. Now you could also come here and change the tool strength, the threshold. That should create more weathering. So the idea is, you know, what a surface might look like if it had been rained on a lot. We can also make the brush wider so that it takes up more area. Okay, so we're getting weathering. So weathering is definitely taking away. It's making the mesh go down, just like water. Water would take away from the surface. Very nice way to create nice textures that way. Okay, so that's the erosion tool, the hydro tool. For me, I feel it's the same thing. It's just a little bit harsher. It doesn't create quite the smooth. Hydro meaning more like it's more fluid, I guess. Maybe if you're creating like a river system, this would be a really nice way to create like different levels for that river system. So then that way it felt like, you know, it had like a, I don't know, if you've ever been out in a stream, you know that it always starts up a little bit higher and then goes down. And it always has like these little slight different layers. Okay, so the first one was the erosion tool, much wider area, much bigger, broader, kind of like a more coarse version of the hydro erosion. Let's look at the noise. So I have the tool strength up pretty fast. That's why it went up very quickly. Okay, so noise is sort of random. It doesn't have a set pattern or anything like that. It's more like static. And I think it actually goes based off of what it sees. So there it saw things going up. Let's say down here things were going down, and it continues to make those things go down. Interesting. It's completely random, right? So in some places it goes up, in some places it goes down. Alright, so the other two tools we'll talk about in another tutorial. This tutorial is starting to get a little bit long. But you see now how you're able to sculpt areas that can go down so that you can create depth, like a canyon, or areas that would be sculpted up, going up like mountains or like hills or things like that. Big thing is not to create areas that characters can reach where they can get stuck. Like that is a great example right there. If a character was ever to get in there, that might be, they might have to reset the game or go back to their last save point because they would not be able to get out of that. Alright, so just watch those things when you're sculpting, kind of smooth things out, and if you need to, walk the whole area and make sure that your character doesn't get stuck. Obviously, the bigger the area, the better your computer is going to need to be, and the more it's going to take when you have to do testing. So the characters, people are going to have to walk the whole area to make sure that nobody can get stuck anywhere. Anyways, with, let's say, some of these mountains in the background, let's go ahead and push play. And we can, oops, our characters are still outside the area. Let's grab them and stick them back inside. Okay, so inside my game area, we now see the tops of mountains, and if we were to go up to the second floor, it would now feel at least not like, that we have at least some land. There's still kind of like some weird horizon stuff going on, like we can still kind of see further than the horizon. Here I can't so much, but let's go down to where the temples were. See, that already looks better. Let's go up to temple. And yeah. I mean, we could put a little bit more mountains up there, so then that way it looks like it goes off a little bit. But it all depends on where your character is going to be, what they're going to be able to see, how far in what direction they're going to be able to look in, and whether you have something that looks like a horizon line that fades off into the distance with enough space for them to kind of, feel like they get to see what looks like an accurate horizon line. Okay, fantastic. So, all right, we'll see you in the next tutorial. We'll hope you enjoyed this video. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.